We declare that there can be no winners in a nuclear war and it should never be fought. Since the use of nuclear weapons would have far-reaching consequences, we also reaffirm that nuclear weapons, as long as they continue to exist, must serve defensive purposes, deterring aggression and preventing war. We believe that further proliferation of such weapons should be prevented. Quoted from the joint statement by the heads of Russia, the United States, China, the United Kingdom, and France on preventing the use of atomic weapons for military purposes. How many nuclear missiles do the United States, China, and Russia have as of 2023? Which missile is the most advanced and powerful? Is nuclear winter as scary as they say it is? How do missile defense systems work, and can they protect against a nuclear strike? The rivalry between Oppenheimer and Kurchatov, the system of nuclear suitcases, the bomb whose explosive wave circled the Earth 3 times in a row. About this and much more you will learn in this video. Atomic nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction, the action of which is based on the destructive factors of a nuclear thermonuclear explosion. The main force is the destructive mega-energy that is released during nuclear fission reactions, or a combination of fusion and atomic fission reactions. In this regard, nuclear and thermonuclear bombs can release enormous amounts of lethal energy using relatively small amounts of active ingredients. A nuclear device the size of a standard bomb could, in theory, wipe out a large city due to the simultaneous effects of a triad of destructive factors: light radiation, powerful shockwave, and penetrating radiation. Here is gradation of modern nuclear warheads is by their classes: nuclear bombs, deep nuclear bombs, warheads for cruise and ballistic missiles of the entire range spectrum, nuclear artillery shells, warheads for naval torpedoes, bottom and anchor nuclear mines, atomic engineering mines, nuclear warheads. Despite numerous tests in different regions of the planet, atomic weapons have been used for military purposes only once. The fathers of the atomic bomb are usually referred to as the American Robert Oppenheimer and Soviet scientist Igor Kurchatov. But given that work on the deadly weapon was carried out in parallel in 4 countries, the resulting bomb can justly be called the brainchild of different nations. The United States and Germany began work on the construction of the atomic bomb almost simultaneously. But Germany, which had no uranium ore reserves of its own and was busy with military operations, could not prioritize nuclear weapons. Such large-scale work, such as the creation of a perfect new type of weapon, is beyond the capabilities of a single person or a small team of scientists. In the U.S. Manhattan Project worked more than 100,000 people, of which 40,000 were scientists, technicians, women calculators. Nevertheless, Americans consider Robert Oppenheimer the father of the bomb. The first test of the bombshell-less bomb thingy, codenamed Trinity, was conducted by the Americans at the Alamogordo test site. The ground explosion of the device showed the power equal to the detonation of 21,000 tons of TNT explosives. The lifeless, unpopulated New Mexico desert was chosen for the test detonation. In addition to the loss of life, several scientists feared an uncontrolled oxygen burnout reaction in the Earth's atmosphere. Encouraged by this success, the U.S. government ordered the preparation of nuclear warheads to be dropped on Japan. Uranium and plutonium charges were dressed in the shells of the bombs. On August 6th at 8 a.m., a bomber piloted by P. Tibbets dropped a uranium bomb called Little Boy over the center of Hiroshima. At the time of the bombing in Hiroshima lived up to 250,000 people, based large military warehouses, headquarters of Field Marshal, commander of the defense of southern Japan. As a result of the explosion, the power is estimated at 17 kilotons. No less horrifying was the explosion of a plutonium charge over Nagasaki. Fat Man on the Japanese port dropped B-29 under the command of Major C. Sweeney. Cloudiness did not allow the crew to accurately aim. The bomb was dropped over the hills and industrial area. Therefore, despite the high power, 21 kilotons, subsequently, At least 450,000 people died in Japan from radiation contamination. The atomic bombings did not bring immediate surrender of Japan, but pushed the USSR to declare war and start the Manchurian operation. But for a while, the aggressive U.S. military circles felt themselves a monopolist who could dictate terms to the whole world. American staffers even developed plans for a pre-emptive war against the USSR. The plan adjusted for 1957 to include NATO countries. Only the first Soviet nuclear weapons tests stopped the aggressive plans. Until 1941, Soviet scientists were engaged in the theory of the structure of the atomic nucleus, chain reactions, and radiochemical research without going to the topic of nuclear weapons. The first impetus for thoughts of military application of atomic decay was the cessation of publications on nuclear physics in scientific journals in Germany, Great Britain, and the United States. By the end of 1941, the NKVD received intelligence reports about the intensification in the United States and Great Britain of secret developments in atomic energy. After that, nuclear research in the USSR was classified. Igor Kurchatov became the head of the Soviet atomic project. An experimental reactor and a working reactor were built to produce weapons-grade plutonium. The gas diffusion technique was used to produce uranium isotopes. On their basis in the closed zone, Kombinat 817, Ozersk, started commercial reactor operation. Mayak Combine began plutonium production using acetate precipitation technology and produced weapons-grade plutonium in the amount required for the first test. The tests of the were conducted at the Semipalatinsk test site in 1949. Military fortifications and civilian facilities were built on a 10-kilometer circle. Equipment, tanks, airplanes, guns was placed at the positions. In military shelters, trenches, and dugouts were tethered sheep and goats. On the far diameter were placed aviaries with experimental animals. All houses, bridges were destroyed or burned, as well as trucks. Guns and tanks were overturned by the shockwave. Only the monolithic frames of reinforced concrete buildings survived. On October 30, 1961, the Soviet Union tested the Tsar bomb, the most powerful explosive device in the history of mankind. It was dropped on 5 parachutes over the archipelago of Novaya Zemlya by a specially prepared Tu-95 bomber. The explosive wave then circled the planet 3 times. In the village, which was 400 kilometers away from the epicenter of the explosion, wooden houses were destroyed and the roofs of stone buildings were torn off. Radio communications were interrupted for hundreds of kilometers around. The test of this thermonuclear bomb was a key factor in allowing the Soviet Union to achieve nuclear weapons parity with the United States. Then the creation of the R-7 and R-16 ballistic missiles, when the U.S. was already beginning work on the Minuteman and Titan II ICBMs, superior to all Soviet missiles. As a result, the Soviet leadership faced the task of not only increasing the total number of ICBMs, but also creating a new generation heavy missile. It had to carry a significantly more powerful nuclear charge and overcome the missile defense system, as well as to be kept fueled and at maximum operational readiness for a long time. The world has been teetering on the brink of a nuclear apocalypse for several months now, although most experts, both adequate and not so adequate, are increasingly dissuaded that such an event is possible. The main holders of the nuclear triad are Russia and the United States. These countries have the largest number of relevant weapons. The nuclear triad is a strategic military force in which the nuclear stockpile is divided among 3 types of weapons: land, air, and sea-based. It is usually represented by intercontinental ballistic missiles, strategic missile bombers, and nuclear submarines. The total number of weapons capable of delivering nuclear warheads in Russia is approaching 6,000, more than 1,500 of them are on alert. The United States, according to media reports, has about 5,500 units. 1.7 thousand of which are on alert. China and India also have a nuclear triad, but their total number of such weapons is significantly less, 500 and 160 respectively. There is no information on whether the weapons are on alert. The principle of distributing the strategic nuclear stockpile among aviation, navy, and land-based forces is necessary to ensure that the enemy does not destroy all nuclear weapons in a single strike. For example, an airplane and boat may not be able to reach the destination. The missile could be shot down. But in the aggregate, something will work. It is the nuclear triad that works as a mechanism of nuclear deterrence. Countries realize that it is impossible to strike the territory of such a state because a corresponding response will follow immediately. The aviation part of Russia's nuclear triad consists of 3 types of aircraft that can deliver nuclear warheads: supersonic strategic missile bombers Tu-160 and Tu-22M3, as well as the world's fastest turboprop missile bomber Tu-95MS. From the ground, nuclear warheads can be launched from Voyvoda, Topol, and Topol-M missile systems and strategic missile complex with the Yars Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. The Intercontinental Ballistic RS-28 takes a special place in this list, Sarmat, which due to its speed cannot be intercepted and has no range limitations. This missile has already been dubbed Satan II in the United States. The Russian ambassador to Washington said that the United States does not like it very much. According to Russian media, Russia plans to put 50 new missiles of this type into service by 2030. The missile carries 10 Avangard guided missile warheads, each with a yield of 750 kilotons. For comparison, the power of the Little Boy atomic bomb, which the Americans dropped on Hiroshima, was about 18 kilotons. A ballistic missile consists of 2 main parts: the booster part and the other part for which the boost is intended. The booster part is a pair or 3 large multi-ton stages loaded with fuel and engines at the bottom. They give the necessary speed and direction to the movement of the other main part of the rocket, the head. After launch, entering orbit, the fairing is dropped. Special elevators spread apart as if scattering in space warheads and decoys. Therefore, the enemy flies a whole swarm of identical targets in technical terms, that is, from the point of view of radars. The Kalmar, Dolphin, and Bory nuclear submarines are responsible for nuclear weapons delivery in the Russian fleet. Russian nuclear submarines are the most hidden component of the nuclear triad. At the same time, they can strike from virtually anywhere in the world's oceans, and even polar ice is no obstacle to them. Of land-based missiles, the United States has the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles, whose maximum range is 13,000 kilometers. The distance from Moscow to Washington is almost half that. In terms of range, after a series of modernizations, slightly superior to its Topol and Yars counterparts. In the air, the U.S. strategic nuclear arsenal is represented by bombers B-52 Stratofortress and B-2 Spirit. Underwater, the Americans have a 3-stage ballistic missile Trident II, which is launched from nuclear-powered submarine missile carriers. What about China? On October 19th, the U.S. Department of Defense published its annual report on China's army and military capabilities. The authors of the report remind that China has been actively developing its nuclear force systems for more than 10 years. To date, it has completed and possibly put into operation 3 areas with up to 300 launch silos are in operation. By 2030, it is expected to deploy at least 1,000 items, and by 2035, it will equal Russia and the United States in terms of their number. Ground-based missile systems remain the backbone of the strategic nuclear forces. Older DF-5 liquid propulsion missiles and modern solid propellant missiles are simultaneously on duty. Some ICBMs are deployed on mobile ground-launched missile systems patrolling in different regions of the PRC. The maritime component is being maintained and developed. There are several ballistic missile submarines of relatively old Type 94 design in service. The moment of takeoff and acceleration is the most vulnerable time for a ballistic missile. From a technical point of view, this is the most optimal moment to intercept the missile. Relatively low speed, a target that is quite large and, most importantly, visible to guidance systems, the absence of various decoys, and the fact that the destruction of the missile will lead to the destruction of all warheads. In general, while ICBMs are vulnerable during takeoff, successful interception requires knowing the missile's location and deploying a nearby missile defense system, which is difficult, if not impossible. The next stage of the flight lasts from 10 to 20 minutes, which allows to place missile defense systems at a greater distance, as well as to spend more time on reaction and decision in case of a possible false alarm. Well, actually, the positive aspects of the situation are over. After leaving the atmosphere, ICBM warheads are separated from the booster and move on inertia. For greater stealth, nuclear warheads are shielded, becoming less visible to missile defense. A large number of ICBMs launch a warhead with multiple nuclear warheads, so that the missile defense system has more than one potential target. The final stage of a nuclear warhead's flight and the last chance for missile defense systems to intercept it. During re-entry, the warhead is in close proximity to its target, allowing missile defense systems to be deployed directly on its territory. Also during re-entry, decoys will give themselves away. Lighter targets slow down more during re-entry. And if a large number of nuclear warheads are aimed at the target, there may not be enough anti-missile missiles nearby. Only 3 countries are currently engaged in strategic missile defense: China, Russia, and the United States. China is currently working on several missile defense systems, one of which successfully intercepted a Chinese satellite in 2013 and another that shot down a Chinese satellite. At the same time, only the United States and Russia have deployed missile defense systems. There are 44 ground-based anti-missile missiles deployed in the United States, California, and Alaska, performing second-stage intercepts. In Russia, only Moscow and partially the Moscow region are protected by strategic missile defense. The A-135 missile defense system was adopted in 1995 and includes a command and control center, 68 short-range interceptor missiles, and radar station. The U.S. President has the authority to personally order the launch of nuclear weapons, and he can choose whether to send one ICBM or all of them at once. Inside the U.S. President's nuclear suitcase is a briefcase with a nuclear warrior course, an activation code, and a means of communication with the U.S. military command. There are a total of 3 suitcases, one held by the President, one held by the Vice President, and the third kept in the White House. The first devices like the nuclear suitcase appeared under Eisenhower, and the familiar form was acquired under President Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. John F. Kennedy was worried that someone would be able to give an order without his authorization, and if necessary, he would not be able to give an order because he would be outside the command center. By the way, the contents and the principle of operation of the suitcase is a state secret. Information about it is indirect, at the level of rumors. It is unknown whether the suitcase really represents what is described above. There are only 3 suitcases in Russia and 1 reserve suitcase. One is kept by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, President, the Minister of Defense, and the Chief of the General Staff. The suitcase is a portable terminal of the Kazbek Automated Nuclear Force Control System. Russia's nuclear suitcase is an instrument of retaliatory strike. It is possible to give an order to launch nuclear weapons only if the automatic system determines a missile attack on Russia. In this case, the system will propose optimal scenarios for a retaliatory strike. And while in the United States, the President himself has the right to decide whether to send nuclear weapons, in the Russian Federation, it is necessary to get confirmation from 2 of the 3 suitcases. Russia also has an autonomous launch system that would launch nuclear weapons on its own in the event of a nuclear strike and loss of communication with the command. The perimeter system, Dead Hand, is an automatic control system for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike created in the USSR at the height of the Cold War and used by Russia. The technology itself is classified, but to put it simply, Perimeter will first test the radiation background level at critical facilities. If it is exceeded, Perimeter will conclude that a nuclear strike has been launched against Russia, and the next scenario will follow. A test signal to the desk of the duty officer and assistant chief of the General Staff and the Minister of Defense. And it's important that the people on the other end of the line answer. If the authorized officer responds, Perimeter will hand over the reins of the situation to him. Otherwise, the next stage of the test will begin. A call to the president's nuclear suitcase. If the president or, for example, the defense minister or the chief of the general staff do not answer the call, Perimeter will draw its own conclusions and start the countdown. There is no official information on the system's rapidity, but experts note that the time to destroy a potential enemy with a retaliatory nuclear strike is 15 to 20 minutes, depending on which launch platforms survive the first strike. Not much is known about decision-making on nuclear weapons in China. There is information from 2004 that such issues are handled by the Central Military Committee, which consists of 11 senior officials and party leaders headed by the chairman. The concept of nuclear winter is one of the most controversial topics concerning nuclear weapons and nuclear war. According to the theory, the simultaneous detonation of several hundred nuclear warheads as a result of a nuclear war would result in a colossal release of smoke and soot into the stratosphere caused by extensive fires. A more light variant is also possible, when due to insufficient total power of explosions there will be a nuclear autumn, a decrease in temperature by 4 degrees all over the Earth. Specific values of the total power of explosions and temperature decrease are rather difficult to establish. One of the common arguments of nuclear winter critics is that the world produced about 2,000 nuclear explosions of varying power in the atmosphere and underground, which together equals the effect of a prolonged, full-scale nuclear conflict. However, the tests did not cause massive fires and firestorms and were time-limited. It seems to many people that modern countries are not prepared to wage major wars because it is not profitable to do so in the context of globalization. It follows that for many states it would be unacceptable to detonate even one nuclear weapon on their territory. The effectiveness of nuclear weapons in the event of war is also questionable, since neither the United States, Russia, nor China has conducted a range test since 1990, limiting itself to computer modeling. What do you think about that? Don't forget to write your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed our video, please like and subscribe.